Welcome everyone here at this Discovery IT20 webinar series, and I will show you some of the things in AI in drug discovery. So the title is Chemical Descriptors and Standardizers for Machine Learning Models, specifically in a drug discovery scenario. So moving forward, so you can see quickly the overview of my talk here, starting with a little bit brief description about AI or machine learning in general, and then its application in drug discovery, and then moving into deep learning in drug discovery, and how you can learn from. So basically all the nitty-gritty of learning from chemical data, and what do you need to work with this chemical data. So broadly talking about three different aspects in a machine learning modeling environment, such as standardizer and structure checkers, a little bit detail about it, structure checkers, chemical fingerprints and descriptors. And then at the end, I will take you through two case studies, which will try to highlight some of the consideration you should take care when you're trying to build a machine learning model with these tools. All right, so if we look at a broader picture, so what are the areas of application of machine learning or deep learning beside drug discovery? So they have been used, or they are currently being used in computer games, speech recognition, computer vision, natural language processing. Of course, you must be aware of the self-driving car scenarios, of course, and we are here to talk about the, and we can say, broad categories of application of machine learning. Moving into AI in drug discovery scenario, so where it has been used or where it is currently being used. So if you look at stages in drug development cycle, so pretty much it has been used in all the major stages, from target selection and validation, where it could be used for predicting activities and modeling the disease, and then moving on to hit discovery, again predicting the activities or identifying new targets, so forth and so on. So most prominently, again, this AI has been used for validating different experimental model, or designing, or it's helping into design libraries, and identifying the adverse effect and predicting the toxicity, as well as at the later stage of drug discovery, it's been also used for text mining and drug-drug interaction prediction. What is the current scenario in deep learning and drug discovery? So there has been a lot of talk, there has been a lot of publication, there has been a lot of promises that the deep learning era has been or will be a promising tool to solve some of the challenges in drug discovery. So there are certain things which are advantageous with the deep learning in drug discovery. So I will try to highlight some of the areas where it has been used, specifically this deep learning in drug discovery. So for compound property and activity prediction. So some of the you can say advantages is that because the way it works, that it can handle a large amount of data, and it can tackle the overfitting problem if you have a small set of data set. A further consideration is that you don't need to do a feature selection when you're using a deep learning technique. You can easily handle a multi-class classification. It has also been used in de novo designing, where you predict the outcome of a reaction or a new chemical structure, etc. And then predicting ligand protein interaction, image analysis in biomedical scenario, where you classify the image coming out of these appliances, as well as disease diagnosis. Well, moving forward, now the main theme of my presentation today is drug discovery. So we will deal into this. So machine learning in general and deep learning methods specifically are quite iterative process. So what it means that there are several round of cycle from idea to experiment and back and forth. So you go on doing this thing and fine tuning the initial idea unless you reach a reliable or acceptable model quality. So most of the time, you can say as much as 80% of the time of a team working with the area of AI is dedicated to a data process, which could include cleaning, standardization, etc. And it is quite important to ensure that you have a good quality chemical data for any meaningful machine learning based model or training. So there is a paradigm in AI that garbage in, garbage out paradigm. So if you feed in the incorrect data or erroneous data into your machine learning task, you will get the garbage out, incorrect model out of it. So it's very important to take these things into consideration and know the nitty-gritty and detail of all these aspects. First thing, if you're dealing with a chemical data or structure data, so first thing you want to make sure that your structures are correct. And then they are standardized in a standard way that you make sure that you're dealing with unique structures. So ChemXZone structure checkers and standardizer are able to handle such tasks of chemical data standardization and cleaning quite effectively. In a machine learning workflow, the next step typically involve encoding the chemical structure into some machine readable format. So then once you have a clean and standardized chemical structures, you need to encode them where chemical fingerprints and different calculated chemical properties could be used to convert this chemical data into numbers, which could then further feed into machine learning algorithms. So in next slide, I will talk about these two different applications, naming standardizer and structure checker, and then later on chemical fingerprints also. So why do you need a standardization of chemical structure? So there does not exist a strict convention that define how to represent chemical structure. So consecutively, a molecule can be displayed in multiple ways. For example, a chemist can draw an aromatic ring in aromatized form or by using alternate single and double bonds, or may draw the hydrogen explicitly or just assume that it is implicitly drawn there. So a standardization of chemical structure is basically the process of transforming a molecule with different chemical representation into a canonical form to make sure that you work with the unique compounds or and then a standardized molecule obey the same chemical representation rule, so ensuring comparability of a structure along with retaining the chemical uniqueness. And then a standardizer is the tool which brings these all consideration into your workflow. So it brings molecule into these uniform representations. So a standardizer could be used anywhere. So what is the most probable use case in the machine learning task? So as chemical compound may exist in different structure representation, in your database, the same molecule can appear multiple times. So using consistent molecular representation created by a standardizer can uncover these issues. As you can see here in the slide, that once you bring all the structures which are represented in different way into a standardized or canonized form, you can identify that there are duplicates. Probably you want to remove them from your training data set. So this could be one of the use case of standardizer in a machine learning task. What are the other things which could be useful? So there are lots of standardizer action, but most relevant for a AI perspective might be you want to remove the fragment. So you want to make sure that you do not have a small fragments associated with your structure. You might need also maybe to remove the salt or remove the solvent, or if you're interested, or if the use case permit, maybe tautomerize the input structures. Let me show you what are the different availability options for standardizer. So it is available as a desktop tool, through its own GUI as well as through other applications such as Checkm for Office. Of course, it is available as a command line tool as well. It's available in different workflow integration programs such as KNIME and Pipeline Pilot, and it is also inbuilt in our many database management tools such as Checkm engines or instant Checkms. Next thing I would like to talk about structure checkers and how they are relevant in a machine learning task. So structure checkers is an interactive chemical validation tool that detects and fixes common structure error in a chemical compound. And so these errors could be potential source of problem further down the line. So you want to make sure that you run these checks pretty in the beginning of your workflow. So beside this tasks, the unpreferred representation can also be fixed by using such tools if there is a need for that. Structure checkers basically works with a predefined checking option which you can choose based on your consideration. And whenever you run a check, you can also see that that what are the issues with it, whether you want to fix them automatically or you want users to be notified and have a look at the structures. So these basically these issues, the detected issues, can be fixed either manually or automatically if required. Let's see what are the most common use case or most common configuration of structure checker in a machine learning scenario. So of course you want to make sure that there are no valence error in your structure. So you might want to employ the valence checker. The core idea of a structure checker is that is strict separation of a structure checking and fixing process. So this concept make it a very highly customizable interactive structure manipulation tool. So there are two steps, as I said in the previous slide. One is the checking process or the checker step, so which screens the chemical compound for structural concerns. So these concerns might be configurable. And then the next step is the fixer or the fixing of those detected issues, which corrects the reported structural problems. So in a machine learning task, you want to do valency checking. You want to detect if there are stereo problems with your compound. You want to maybe check atom and bond lengths, because that might be important if you are calculating different graph and those kind of descriptors. And of course, you want to make sure there are no aromaticity problem in your data set. Next, once you have a clean data, you have standardized the things, you want to convert these into numbers in order to make available for different machine learning algorithms. So chemical fingerprints and descriptors are the way you can encode these structures into numbers. So what are the available chemical fingerprints from Chemaxon? ECFP, the most prominent one or the most known one. We have which are basically the circular topological fingerprint designed for molecular characterization, similar searching, as well as structure activity modeling. We have chemical hash fingerprint. These are a molecule bit string that is a sequence of 0 and 1 digit that contain information on the structure. So chemical hash fingerprints are mostly used in the areas of chemical database handling and combinatorial chemistry. So I would emphasize that these all fingerprint have different application areas. So based on your workflow or need, you can employ them. The pharmacophore fingerprint basically includes the binding related structure or chemical properties of a chemical compound that are probably responsible, that are assumed to be or thought to be responsible for a specific pharmacological action. The need for comparing the chemical reaction using computational tool is a basic need in the field. So techniques developed for estimation of chemical or other type of similarity of molecule can also be adopted to similarity estimation of chemical reaction. So that's where reaction fingerprints plays important role. And then the last is MAX 6166 fingerprint, which is a very common fingerprint, especially useful for the purpose of molecular similarity. So next, I will not talk about all other fingerprints, but ECFP, because that has most important role to play in a machine learning task. So extended connectivity fingerprints are basically circular topological fingerprints, and they have application designed from similarity searching as well as a modeling task. So these are the few important characteristic of ECFP. They can have presence or absence of a particular substructure, and they represent the molecule by means of circular atom neighborhoods. In the next few slides, I will give you a little bit of detail of how these fingerprints are calculated and what are the different configurations options available where you can tweak them based on your need. So there are two ways to represent a ECFP for a molecule. One is only that you identify the list of integers, and then the next one is that you can either convert them to a fixed length bit string. So there are different consideration for these two methods. So the first way to represent ECFP will have a varying length list of integers, and these all integers are identified or identifying a substructure in the given molecule. With the fixed length bit string, you basically use a hash function to convert them to a binary fixed length string. One of the advantage why you want to do that is that because you require less computer storage to store them, but at the same time because they are folded into a shorter length, so there are possibility of loss of information. So these all consideration or points are probably useful in some way or other way. So let's see how a typical ECFP generation works. So basically it starts with the initial assignment of atom identifier, and then based on the configuration option of diameter, you go on iteratively updating these identifier and identifying these all sub graph, I would say, and then at the later stage you remove the duplicate subgraphs from the list of the identifiers. And if you opt for a fixed length bit string, the next step would be folding these identifiers using some sort of hash function to fold it into or represent into a fixed length bit string. So that the decision to choose the length of the bit string might result in some bit collision. So that's where the loss of information is there. So moving on, let's see what are the important ECFP configuration available, which you should, as a machine learning practitioner, be aware of if you're dealing with chemical data. So you can basically configure these three main parameters. So one is the diameter of the diameter of the subgraph. So you can choose it ranging from 2 to 8 to 10, anything. So just as a rule of thumb, so when you have a diameter of 4, that's most commonly used for similarity searching and clustering, and for modeling purposes a diameter of 6 to 8 is most commonly employed and most important to use. The next thing you can configure is the length of the bit string, as I said earlier. So the larger length decreases the information loss, but at the same time it requires a larger computational storage space. The third configuration option or parameter you can choose to set is that if you wanna store the occurrence count of these all integers or not. What are the different availability options for these fingerprint generators? So of course they are available from command line tools, so they can be integrated in a script. They are available as Java API, very flexible way to a great way to integrate in your workflow and write your own program, as well as they are also available from workflow tools such as Nine. But these are not the only different representation or chemical representation of features you might need to use in a machine learning task. So there are other chemical features which are quite often used, and they are quite important also. So one of them is Physicum calculator. So it has pKa calculation, log P, log D, solubility, as well as hydrogen bond donor and acceptor numbers. So they play a quite important role in characterizing or describing a molecule's activity, and so they are also quite often used in machine learning tasks. The next chemical feature which could be important is geometrical descriptor calculators, which calculates basically 3D geometric descriptors based on a 3D optimized molecule in a 3D XYZ coordinates. And the other important feature could be this MMFF94 energy, which is a force field family of chemical force field. The other categories of chemical features which could be used is topology-based features. Basically, it's involve counting different type of atom and bond, counting the path between different nodes, and ring-based topology features, as well as distance-based topology feature. So in a typical in a typical machine learning task, so you will probably choose some of the features among them. So this is a big consideration of especially if you're working with a small data set. Sometimes you need to understand these features so that you can hand engineer these features. Of course, they are not very relevant if you are dealing with a very large data set, or you decided to use the deep learning techniques where it is not that much relevant, this aspect of hand engineering the features. So let's go ahead and see the case study. So I'm going to show you two case study. The first of them is deep neural network based prediction of hERG activity. So a little bit background about probably it's the most known protein potassium ion channel in a drug discovery group. So basically, hERG is a channel which mediates the ion movement across the layer in a cardiac muscle. Why it is important that when this channel ability to conduct the electrical current across the cell membrane is blocked, either by a drug or by a mutation, it can result in a longer QT interval, which leads to potential life-threatening arrhythmia. So in very early stage, most of the researchers, they want to check their compounds if they are hERG active or not. So what is the data set for this case study? So this data set comes from a high throughput hERG profile assay, which basically has measured a very large set of compound against this hERG profile assay. So this collection contained both known bioactive natural product and commercial compound collection, and a large percentage, around 90% of them, are very diverse compound. So in this data set, the compound inhibition of hERG activity was measured at two different concentration, 1 micromolar and 10 micromolar test concentration, and based on that, basically you could classify them, or in this case study, we classify them in three different class of inhibitor, activator, or the inactive compounds. So whenever the current flow or the measured current was more than or equal to 20%, they were classified as inhibitor. If it is less than minus 20% or equal to, then they are the activator, and the remaining compounds were classified as inactive. So this was a workflow in developing this model. So we started with a 300,000 molecule library, which comes from the patch clamp assay data set I showed you in the previous slide. So first step was to check for any valency error using a structure checker, check for aromaticity error, ring strain, and all sort of chemical discrepancies. Once they have been checked, and wherever it was possible to fix them, fix it, otherwise discard the compounds. Next, they were feed into a chemical sterilizer workflow, which involved basically removing the salt and fragments, canonicalizing them, as well as removing the very low and high molecular weight compounds from the data set. Next step is you want to convert them into chemical descriptors. So a different combination of physicochemical descriptors as well as ECFP and fingerprints were tried. I will show you the results of these all in the next few slides. And then these data set was feed into a deep neural network. I will show you the architecture of the model in the next slide, basically to come up with a model, the best performing model, and these models were evaluated on F1 score as well as Matthews correlation coefficient. So this is the architecture of my deep neural network for hERG activity prediction. I use Keras deep learning framework where TensorFlow was at the back end. So basically, it's the process data set feed into in variable input layer. So I tried different number of features. That's what correspond to number of input layers. So ranging from 102. 4 to 4096 number of input layers, and then passing through multiple layers of multiple hidden layers ranging from 4 to 6, and number of nodes in all these layers were ranging from 400 to around 16,000, and using dropout to avoid the overfitting and all sort of thing. ReLU was activation function in all the hidden layer, and output layer has a soft activation function, which was a 3-node output layer because we had 3 classes in our data set: inhibitor, activator, and yes. So basically, this is a general overview of the architecture of deep neural network. So let's see what is the result of the best performing model. So as I mentioned in the very beginning of the presentation, that machine learning tasks are generally very iterative. So I'm not showing you all the models which we generated. So this is the best performing model which was generated using ECFP4. A 4096-bit, and you can see the different statistics of train and test data set. One thing I think I forget to mention is that the ratio of train to test was that 95% of the data set was used for training, and then the remaining 5% was split into test and development set 2.5% each. You can see from the F1 score and the MCC and accuracy. So you can say that it's a really robust model, avoiding the overfitting, where it. So if you have an overfit model, generally it performs well with the training data set, but it has poor performance with test. But you don't have this problem in this model. So it basically can say the models are well generalized model in this case. The next thing we did is that we wanted to understand why. So we checked the incorrectly classified compounds. So they were 1100 roughly out of the total 300,000. We wanted to see that why these compounds are incorrectly classified. So using MCS scaffold, we could identify a common structure among these incorrectly classified compounds. So this could be something to think about and analyze further if you want to understand, if you want to model it more accurately, or you want to derive the conclusion from this modeling. Let me take you to the second case study, which is again the same target, hERG activity, but the data set was different. It was a relatively smaller data set of 8,000 molecules. So this number is after processing. Basically, we tried here 2 different combination of descriptors. So in one case, just ECFP6 descriptor. In the other case, ECFP6 was combined with certain topological and physicochemical features. The data set was smaller, so there is no need to use such computationally expensive deep neural network. So a simpler modeling techniques such as random forest would also be employed. And you can see the model statistics here. You see the the accuracy and area under the curve for these two different models. And if you notice that with having more features, not exactly having more feature, with combining different features, so there is possibility that you can increase the model performance. I would like to mention here is that after a certain level, that improvement in model quality become increasingly smaller and smaller. So even a 1 point increase in accuracy, area under the curve, while generally not much compromising with the accuracy, is still a very good improvement in the model. So with trying a different representation basically can bring more information for your model to learn from. So what you can take away from this study and this talk is that customizable standardizer and fingerprint allows you to use in different applications. Based on your need, you can configure them. You can choose to different configure options based on your need. And another thing is that generally a longer print fingerprint captures more information and will lead to a better model quality, but at the same time you will require a large computational storage space. And the last thing is that if combining these different ways to convert a compound into feature, that is chemical disruptor, might lead to higher information capture, and it can occur into increased model performance. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining today, and we are open for questions if you have any.